The Wild Thornberry was, well, literally a wild show. I'm sure all of us in this economy dream of going back to good old farming or living in a hatchback van. But with kids? Really? Well, that is exactly what the Thornberrys did, by the way. Meet the weird yet cheery family of 4, the Thornberrys, that just randomly picked up a kid from the jungle, so now they are technically a family of 5. Oh no, wait, they also have a monkey on board, so yeah, let me rephrase that. Meet the weird yet cheery family of 6, the Thornberrys. With 3 kids and a chimp named Darwin, the Thornberry parents, Marianne and Nigel, thought it was the perfect idea to restrict their kids from a normal life on Earth and tour them around the deadliest savannas, rainforests, deserts, and whatnot for a very unaverage life. Actually, no. They did all that so they could shoot their wild nature documentary. I mean, sure, it sounds fun, but that just does not seem like good parenting. It's kind of selfish. Especially when the kids are barely adults. I mean, the oldest of them, Debbie, is literally whining for a social life outside of living with a monkey that's more civil than the feral little brother, Donnie. Plus, she's only a teen. The girl literally had an email boyfriend. And I'm sure a rainforest isn't the best place to harbor those hormones. Plus, throughout the course of the series, the best idea of playtime the second child and our main protagonist Eliza gets is venturing into the wild all alone with Darwin. And yes, the girl's literally getting almost rammed, killed, and dismembered. At one point, she was chilling with jaguars and also chased by a croc. I mean, the list is endless. How does she get away with it? Well, she can talk to animals. Yeah, like talk, and we'll get to that part later on. Nevertheless, Nigel, the dad, rocks a khaki vest and oozes excitement. He's all about making nature documentaries and catching wild critters on film. That's his jam. With his British charm and non-stop curiosity, he's like the ultimate adventurer. Then there's his wife, Marianne. She's right there with him, clicking away as the wildlife photographer and the one shooting the whole thing. Plus, she's also the matriarch of the family, like the stricter parent out of the two, and can be quite condescending to her kids when they naturally complain about dragging them out to the wild. Meanwhile, Nigel is more like a carefree adult who refuses to let go of his youthful spirits, and that's amazing. He's like a really amazing character too, but he's also a dad. Dads have responsibilities, people! But at least he sympathizes with the kids more than Marianne. Plus, the dude is clearly an established man of respect, and I mean serious respect, because he even got knighted for his service in the field. I mean, at one point, the Thornberrys had a chance to leave the wildlife behind and give their kids a normal life. It was when the Thornberrys visited Nigel's parents in Scotland at Thornberry Hall just before Nigel was to be knighted by the Queen of the United Kingdom. When they got there, Nigel's mother, Cordelia, kept pushing him to take a tenured professor job at Oxford. Now, the idea of settling down didn't sit well with Eliza, but for Debbie, this was the moment to escape the harrowing wild. But in the end, the Thornberrys bunch hurried to London for Nigel's knighting event, and after getting knighted, the newly dubbed Sir Nigel drops the ultimate bomb, deciding to stick with his show instead of teaching at Oxford, which really annoyed Debbie and Cordelia. Poor Debbie, honestly. So yeah, he literally turned down a comfortable, respectful life for muddy boots and a bunch of terribly tired kids. But why did Nigel turn down such a chance? Well, here's a theory. Nigel, who comes from a fancy family, is like a total animal expert, but not so great at other stuff. Now, he could be on the autism spectrum, which explains why he acts in such unpredictable ways. His family did their best to raise him well, and they were clearly stoked when he got offered a gig as a professor at Oxford. But him turning down the whole school thing and deciding to travel and do what he loves only throws food at this theory. His moods and his tendency to get into risky situations made him kinda distant from his kids. That's why they're often left on their own in the RV. However, I'm not really sure of this point since he is quite close to the kids throughout the series too. Nevertheless, Marianne goes along with him on his adventures to make sure he's alright. She's like the only one who's keeping it together, torn between doing right by the guy she fell for and taking care of their kids. Whether this theory is true or not, and even though Nigel and Marianne aren't exactly the most practical parents, I've got to admit they really know their stuff when it comes to wildlife. And you know what? They're actually big nature enthusiasts and do a bunch for animals. They've got this genuine love for creatures, always swooping in to rescue them from bad situations and teaching their kids to do the same. Once, when animals were running scared while their homes were getting destroyed, Eliza discovered something awful. These two really mean poachers, Kip and Beaterman, also the show's main antagonists, were using a gigantic machine to wreck a piece of the rainforest and basically gobble it up. So, Nigel and Marianne went on a mission to get help from the government to stop these guys. At the same time, Eliza joined forces with the Amazon animals to fight against them. It turned into this epic battle between the good guys and the bad guys. Eliza had to convince the animals that if everyone pitched in, they could totally put a stop to the destruction and save their forest home. And this wouldn't have been possible in the absence of the values the Thornberry parents had instilled. But let's for a while come back to the odd side of the Thornberrys. Remember the kid they picked up, Donnie? Yup, so the guy is a literal feral kid they found in the jungle and adopted, which is really sweet, but it makes you think they kinda should have tried to find his parents, maybe? However, now that he's adopted, you'd think he'll get civil. But nopity nope. This guy seems to be just as unhinged and perhaps more. He's running around eating bugs, and honestly, if there's one Thornberry I'm not worried about getting gobbled up by some predator, it's Donnie. He's an absolute pain in the head to the poor animals as well. The weird part is that Nigel and Marianne seem to have no intention of turning him into a civilized kid. They seem to be just ignoring the mess he is and constantly leaving a kid like him with Eliza and Debbie to babysit. Also, in one episode, they see him act a bit less non-human and whip out the camera to shoot and study him. Like, dude, do they consider him an animal equivalent or a genuine child? But guess what? The whole story of Donnie's past and where he comes from starts to unravel when the Thornberrys go back to Borneo right around Donnie's birthday, or more like the day they found him, since they're not sure about his actual birth date. You see, Donnie's parents, Michael and Lisa, were total nature enthusiasts who were all about Borneo. They decided to stick around in that place because they loved nature, especially orangutans. And they got pretty chummy with the local folks, who even gave them a baby carrier for Donnie. What's really cool is that Donnie's family made friends with an orangutan mom and her kiddo. They even taught them sign language, and Donnie picked it up too. There's this one sign that's shown in the series. It means family, but we're not exactly sure how much he learned. Things were going great for Donnie's fam until one super dark night when some bad guys tried to steal the same orangutan family that Donnie's crew had become pals with. Luckily, Donnie's family managed to save the mom and baby, but it's a real downer. Those bad guys got back at them and killed Donnie's parents. I know that it's very sad. Still, the villagers put together a really nice funeral for Donnie's parents. However, during the ceremony, Donnie stood by the river, and when he saw the orangutan family, something inside him clicked and he chose to go with them. From then on, Donnie lived with them, and he was partially raised by the mommy orangutan until she had a fateful encounter with another family of naturalists. And guess who they were? The Thornberrys. She must have felt that it was time for Donnie to switch gears and become part of the human clan. So she basically left Donnie to be noticed, and once Marianne spotted Donnie all alone, of course she immediately took him. With the orangutan mother keeping an eye on things, she had signaled for Donnie to trust Nigel, and that's when the Thornberrys made the decision to bring him into their fold and give him the name Donnie. Now back to the Thornberrys on their trip back to Borneo. Something amazing happens. Donnie actually gets to meet his old orangutan mom again. See, he had run off because Eliza got mad at him, but then the whole family gets back together and Nigel and Marianne find out from the villagers about who Donnie's parents were and also that they were a part of their past too. Back when they were on their honeymoon, they had actually met Donnie's mom and dad. Isn't that wild? Plus, Donnie still remembers his real parents. He drew a picture of them from memory, or tried his best to, and it looked just like them in a photo. It's kind of a sad but sweet moment. So in the end, Nigel and Marianne officially adopted Donnie and added Michael to his name after his bio dad, sweetly naming him Donald Michael Thornberry. I'm just happy that he's got a family now. However, while Donnie venturing into the wild can be blamed on his feral nature, not so much can be said about Eliza. Because Eliza holds all the critical reasoning and still ends up in the most dangerous situations with wild animals. Seriously. That's because she can talk to animals and has been given this gift, which she must keep a secret. However, some fans have this idea that Eliza might be dealing with stuff like schizophrenia and depression. I mean, it makes sense, right? She's not leading a regular kid's life. Also on the move, no stable friends. They also speculate that her family is in fact aware of her seeing things that aren't real, but instead of facing it head on, they kinda just pretend it's not a thing. So here's Eliza, still pretty young, trying her best to handle it all. She's all about traveling and finding animals for the fam, hoping they can hang out more. Her visions make her think she's talking to animals, but really it's just her condition acting up. She calls it a gift, but it's more like the effects of what she's going through. Now, Darwin was the first animal Eliza had talked to. She tossed him a name she figured her old man would give a thumbs up to, all to score some brownie points. And guess what? Darwin's totally in Eliza's debt and shadows her everywhere like the ultimate sidekick. He's always trying to be like the voice of reason, talking her out of those crazy stunts she pulls. It's basically Eliza's inner thoughts channeled through the monkeys while she's off on her adventures. This also connects to the theory that Nigel is autistic in a way that Eliza is aware of her father's condition, and the sole reason her mother takes off is to ensure that he's right. It's actually this video that resonates in her head. This is why Darwin is always talking in that posh British accent. However, this would make sense if not for the movie, because when she loses the ability to speak human, her family were genuinely concerned and weren't ignoring the matter at hand. Throughout the series, literally no one comes to know of her ability to communicate until the movie, where she desperately drops the big secret after poachers threaten to hurt Debbie and she actually loses her powers. Luckily, down the line, she swoops in and saves a bunch of elephants from those poachers again, and bam, her powers are back in action. In the end, Debbie becomes the only member of the Thornberry family to know of her gift, and turns out she also has to keep it a secret because if she does not, she's gonna turn into a literal baboon. I bet on top of suffering a very non-normal teen life, she would not want that. Well, it all happens when Darwin, Eliza, and Donnie meet a gorilla who mentions seeing people setting up a fence across Tempo Valley. That's when they run into the Blackburns, a group of poachers, and Eliza concludes that the poachers are targeting the elephant herd traveling through the valley. Later, the trio finds Tally, a cheetah cub in the Blackburns RV, exposing their true nature as poachers. The Blackburns capture them and reveal the fence is electrified. This is when Eliza and Darwin have an argument, and when Darwin accuses Eliza of not knowing how to use her powers properly, she harshly tells him to shut up. Meanwhile, Debbie meets a local boy named Boko, who is sent by his village elders to assist her. The two reach the Blackburns RV, but Debbie is held hostage by Sloane Blackburn after she reveals that she is Eliza's sister. So when Sloane threatens to hurt Debbie if Eliza doesn't tell him how she found out their plan, Eliza admits it was because of her ability to talk to animals. Automatically, she breaks the rule about not telling anyone, and a storm comes in and takes away Eliza's power while the Blackburns flee. However, they somehow reach Tempo Valley in time to see the elephant herd heading for the electric fence. Eliza grows very upset as she feels she is useless without her powers and is unable to apologize to Darwin for her earlier words. This is when Debbie reminds her that she has been helping animals long before gaining her powers, restoring her confidence. So when the Blackburns, riding a helicopter, order their men to set off explosives, forcing the elephants to charge toward the fence, Eliza triggers the fence's electricity prematurely, causing the herd to stop temporarily, and then convinces the lead elephant to turn around. Infuriated, Sloane grabs Eliza and throws her into the water. He then attempts to shoot the elephants, but they pull the Blackburns helicopter out of the air and destroy it. Though they survive, they are arrested by rangers soon after. In the end, Eliza is shaved by Shaman Iminyambo, who tells her she saved the elephants using her heart, and as a reward, he gives her powers back with Debbie into the secret as well. Oh, by the way, this was the same shaman who hooked Eliza up with the power to chat with animals in the first place. The whole thing started about 2 years back when Eliza was just 10 years old. So when the Thornberrys were hanging out in Western Africa making their super first Thornberry documentary, they had set up camp, and while Marianne was filming Nigel for the first episode of Sir Nigel Thornberry's Animal World, Eliza was kinda looking around. Out of the blue, Eliza spots this chimpanzee and throws out a hi to the little fella. The chimp gets all shy and hides for a sec, but then Eliza goes all chimp talk on him, and they're suddenly having this chimp-human conversation thing going on. The chimp totally gets what Eliza's saying and strolls up to her, and they start hanging out together. Only Debbie spooks the chimp away. So what does Eliza do? She goes all jungle explorer and heads off into the wild to track down her chimp buddy. While she was searching for him, Eliza suddenly stumbled upon a warthog with its leg trapped in a bear trap. She made the quick choice to help it out and grabbed onto the trap and opened it, freeing the warthog's leg. Now free, the warthog strolled toward Eliza and out of nowhere began to undergo a transformation. It turned into a human man right in front of Eliza, which totally caught her off guard. My God, if that had happened to me, I would not have been off guard, but more like passed out? But Eliza was like, whoa, how did you become a person? And guess what? It turned out to be none other than Shaman Emanyambo. He went on to explain that her actions had broken a spell. Because she had undone the spell that had transformed him, the shaman had the ability to grant Eliza a wish. Of course, Eliza wasted no time and told the shaman that she wanted to talk to animals. So, the shaman took out his scepter, worked his magic, and gave Eliza the power to communicate with animals. After the shaman left, it dawned on Eliza that she could now understand animals, and lucky her, she crossed paths with the same buddy chimp again and decided to name him Darwin. That's where their story began. They obviously got super close, so much so that Eliza chose to bring Darwin into her family. Back at her family's camp, the two of them come back, but when Eliza attempts to have a chat with her parents, a major realization hits her. She can't speak human anymore. It turns out that while the shaman was giving her the ability to talk to animals, he ended up switching her language to animal talk permanently. So, Eliza and Darwin had to go through a whole bunch of trouble to track down the shaman and fix the blunder. Eventually, they make it back to the camp where her parents finally give the green light to keep Darwin. However, Debbie's definitely not thrilled about the whole situation. But then Debbie is always not thrilled about anything given that she's totally done with her family's passion. But sadly, being totally dependent on her parents, she also can't make a run for it. Geez, I can see the distance between her and this family when she grows up as an adult already. But nevertheless, she doesn't do anything more than just whining, complaining, and being super duper irritated. However, once in a while she does flip out. Don't get her wrong, she does love her parents and all, but being that frustrated is bound to show up sometimes, so once Debbie accidentally hurted her father's feelings and joined a couple of eccentric 1930s era volcano chasers, Mitzi and Merrick Dash. The Thornberrys were trying to have a sweet little holiday reflection time, dressing up a pumpkin man with all the old clothes when Debbie had come out and threw a pink blouse to dress the thing in. If it were any odd thing, maybe this would have passed by, but the blouse was something Nigel had gotten for Debbie, a very expensive present. But of course, Debbie had to have a sour mouth, and that got him a tad bit sad. How could her dad not get she wasn't into pink, right? But when this 1960 vintage volcano enthusiast group drops in and gives Debbie a ride, she totally falls for them in their thrill. Like, she even tells her parents how cool it is to always live an inch away from danger and thrive. Like, excuse me, woman, your parents are doing literally the same? But I guess she wanted a get scorched by an erupting volcano kind of danger and not the bug rash kind of danger. So she packed up her things and literally ran off. And let me tell you, she regretted that quite quickly and almost got both the vintage bozos and her family in serious trouble. Like, she even kidnapped some dude's llama to get away. Seriously. And here's the funny part. Even the Thornberrys' Combi has so much personality throughout the show thanks to Debbie always having some sort of beef with the vehicle. She's always trying to hijack and flee off the thing into adventures, and that just gives us a series of seriously fun episodes. When they were on the island of Zanzibar, Debbie literally begged Marianne to let them take the Combi, and though she was not giving in to her pleas once they asked Nigel and he allowed, Marianne followed. The main purpose to take the Combi was none other but shopping, and despite the fact that Eliza had literally helped her in getting permission, she was very selfish about taking her sightseeing. Thank God they had their cousin there to smooth things out, but the thing was they ended up in the market where they did not know the language in which the merchants talked. So the majority of the shopping was aimlessly pointing at things and exchanging it for whatever they want. Basically barter. So when the three of these bozos ended up before a merchant that was not selling Debbie a very fashionable dress. Honestly, it was ugly as hell. Like, girl, what are you gonna pay? A fortune teller's tablecloth? Well, whatever. Tyler the cousin tried to play smart and had the merchant trade it for a ride in the Combi. Only what the merchant really meant was, gimme the whole Combi. He just casually drives off with her Combi, and that's when the three of them start realizing things are going south real fast. The kids had to spring into action and chase after the guy who's now cruising in their Combi like it's no big deal. Their goal? To have a talk with him and sort things out, but they had to navigate through a bunch of local monkeys before they could even get to that. And then in Uganda, they had another little Combi adventure when Nigel and Marianne were trying to film this super rare bird in Uganda's windy, impenetrable forest, unaware of their little feral litter that was having a fighting fit in the Combi. Once they were off to do their recordings, the girls, Eliza and Debbie, classically started having this girl fight. It escalated pretty quick, and while tussling over the tape player, the two got so off focus that Debbie accidentally released the Combi's brakes. The next we know was the whole thing going off downhill, literally. And though their lives were not harmed, the Combi finally came to a stop on a muddy riverbank where it was super glued like hell, and now the two nemeses had to work together to get it out and save themselves from Marianne's wrath. Plus, you'd be surprised to know who helped them chuck it out. Literally, mountain gorillas. And you'd be dead wrong if you think they stopped here. Nope, there's even more. There was this other time in East Africa when Debbie was totally bugging Marianne to let her drive the Combi while they were filming lions. It kinda annoyed her so much that eventually, while they were in the middle of filming, she sorta gave in with a meh attitude. But man, that decision totally backfired because Miss Debbie ended up losing control of the Combi because the stupid girl threw her gum, which disabled the brakes, and yep, you guessed it, it took a muddy nosedive down the riverbank. Again! And as if that wasn't enough, a storm came out of nowhere and washed the Combi away. That left the game stuck by the riverbank, vulnerable to who knows what lurking around. And guess what? The lesson still hadn't sunk in. Debbie went on foot to track down the Combi, while Eliza followed her and Darwin and Donnie followed Eliza. I mean, seriously, these are kids, right? Before they knew it, they all found themselves being hunted by a lion and two lionesses. They literally had to outsmart these predators to save their own lives. Makes you understand why I called the Thornberrys a bit impractical when it comes to parenting, doesn't it? But you know, throughout the series, it's mainly about this family going on adventures. They don't really dive deep into the characters' personal stuff until the final season, where they kind of shine a romantic light on it. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the kids, especially the growing up ones like Debbie and Eliza, were mostly exposed to animals and their parents. So now, out of nowhere, they introduce this guy character, Shane. And let me tell you, it's like adding fuel to the fire when you toss a guy into the mix between these two girls who haven't had much exposure to guys. No surprise, things take a turn and suddenly both of them have a major crush on this dude. It's like they upgraded from fighting over tape players to duking it out over a guy. Classic move, right? But here's the thing that gets me. The whole Shane situation feels a bit off. It's probably a move to stir up more interest in the show, which I get, but surprisingly, it works. It's not a bad addition, and they actually pulled off some pretty decent episodes with him in the mix without totally messing up the vibe of the series. So, they bring in this dude Shane at the Foundation's request, your classic teenage rocker type who joins the Thornberrys when they're up in Alaska. When they go to pick him up, there's a whole bunch of girls going nuts since Shane's some kind of teen pop sensation. However, as cool and good looking as he might appear to Debbie and Eliza, this guy's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, and it doesn't take too long for the two of them to realize it. Since both Eliza and Debbie have a crush on Shane, they decide to tag along with him on some adventures. And guess what? They quickly discover that Shane's not the brightest bulb around. But the interesting part is that despite being this popular and with not much going on upstairs, he's surprisingly nice. He doesn't act all high and mighty because of his fame, and even gets down to some water balloon action to give Donnie a bath. Anyway, the rivalry between the two sisters keeps going strong. There's this one time when Eliza and Shane decide to check out an old gold mine that's supposedly loaded with fool's gold, but Eliza's whole plan goes down the drain when Shane goes ahead and invites Debbie to join them. So, for a good chunk of time, these two sisters are locked in a pretty intense competition over this guy. But then things start shifting. Shane's attention starts gravitating more towards Eliza, and that kind of makes Debbie lose interest in him. Honestly, that's a relief because Eliza was way cooler about the whole guy situation, unlike Debbie, who was all over the place in true teenage fashion. And let's be real, the whole Shane rivalry thing was getting old fast. And guess what? You wouldn't believe this, Debbie actually starts helping Eliza win Shane over. So when Shane is about to head back to his life as a pop star and leave the Thornberrys behind, Eliza realizes she's gotta spill her feelings before it's too late. But they end up having a little argument and Shane takes off. So Eliza has to go on a mission to find him, sort things out, and bare her soul. Meanwhile, Marianne, the mom, starts getting anxious about her girls growing up and moving on. I mean, let's face it, how long can you keep your kids cooped up in a Combi? In the end, when Shane's plane shows up, he says his goodbyes to each member of the Thornberry crew and finally makes things right with Eliza. Plus, we get to see them share a kiss, and a sweet scene where Eliza watches his plane takes off, disappearing from sight. And right in the middle of all this craziness, Eliza also manages to figure out what she wants to do with her life. It's not really a shocker when she decides she wants to become a vet. I mean, her parents are basically all about nature, and I doubt this girl has seen much of anything except the wild outdoors up close. Good on her though, because she jumps right into it. While they're out filming emperor penguins in Antarctica, Eliza starts practicing for her vet dreams. She stumbles upon a wounded penguin and goes all out to save it, only she accidentally messes things up even more by separating the penguin from its partner, an egg. So she goes all out and borrows a snow speeder to fix things up and get the penguin back to its breeding grounds. At least she's on the right track. So Eliza went on this crazy adventure all around the world with the Thornberrys, and I mean, they literally traveled everywhere, having all sorts of wild experiences. Gotta admit, the show was a breath of fresh air, mixing in love for nature with diverse landscapes and awesome escapades. Let me tell you about this one time when the Thornberrys landed in Japan near Mount Fuji on a mission to film the Asian black bear. And just to add to the excitement, Marianne's parents swung by to celebrate their 50th anniversary with the gang. Now, Marianne's grandpa, Frank, wasn't your typical grandpa. Health issues aside, this guy had a thing for not acting his age, and you can imagine the rest because Eliza, Darwin, and Grandpa Frank go off to climb Mount Fuji. And at one point, the Thornberrys ended up in Pakistan, and it just so happened that Eliza and Debbie totally blanked on it being Mother's Day. The girls start scouring the market for a special gift for their mom, and that's when they stumble upon this jewelry stand. Only problem, their budget doesn't quite match up. But then, things take a twist when a rock slide closes off the road they were using, and the two dive headfirst into their quest for the ultimate Mother's Day present. Meanwhile, they kind of miss the fact that their mom's just trying to spend quality time with them. Oh, and then there's this one time in Siberia, hanging out by a river that feeds into Lake Baikal. Nigel and Marianne are all about filming Russian lynxes while the girls are stuck doing boring inventory stuff back at the camp. But guess what? Debbie and Eliza both ditch their duties. Debbie takes off with Donnie on a raft to Bolshoi Goti, and Eliza and Darwin go check out a beaver dam nearby. And as expected, things take a wild turn when an out-of-nowhere storm hits. But that's just how this show likes to keep things exciting.